Good morning, Invictus Men, or good afternoon, possibly at this point. Happy Memorial Day to those of you that have served, that have had family that have served and that have died for us, for this freedom that we get to enjoy. I want to thank you. I know the great cost that comes with, and I know how government and nations are instruments in God's hands to bring about his justice on earth, to stem the tide of evil. And I have no doubt that America has been used by God for such a use, to stem the tide of evil across many nations, across this world, and this what I do believe is American exceptionalism, meaning that there is, as a result of this country being built on Christian principles, an understanding that was brought about that created a certain type of freedom and competition in this economy, that built a certain type of greatness as a result of that freedom. And there's a wealth, there's a type of army and so on that has been developed in this country, and as a result of natural resources and a type of free thinking that God has used to govern many nations. So that's something that we should not feel that we are entitled to. It is God, only because of God's goodness and blessing, and this country obeying certain laws and statutes and principles that God has made true to all men in all places, and the adherence to that has been able to create a certain type of freedom and so on, only because of his goodness. So last week I touched on 2 Timothy, and I want to continue along that thread in light of Memorial Day. And I want to read from 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verses 3. And it says, "You therefore must endure hardship as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No one engaged in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who has enlisted him as a soldier." This context of Paul exhorting Timothy to continue as a soldier, and later on we see as a farmer and as an athlete, but focusing in light of Memorial Day, in light of this warfare, this soldier, this defense language. The context here is Paul writing to Timothy, who is the pastor of this church at Ephesus. And as you read through 2 Timothy and 1 Timothy, this church is enshrined by false doctrine. And Timothy is enduring a lot of hardship because of this false doctrine. And we see that beginning in chapter 1, Paul speaks about a lot of the suffering, and throughout the book, suffering. But then you see this term, idle babblings, men that just like to talk continuously throughout 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy. And the context of this enduring hardship as a good soldier is in light of a lot of false doctrine, men that just like to babble, idle babbling that continues, and that they always like to continue in senseless talk as a result of not being immersed in sound doctrine, but itching ears and always chasing after new doctrines and new teaching as a result of not being well grounded in sound doctrine. And this is this letter to Timothy that Paul writes, that enduring hardship as a good soldier means that in spite of all of that stuff, Timothy, and we go on to see, must apply himself to sound doctrine, learning it well. And it says that no one engaged in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who enlisted him as a soldier. there's this sense that if Timothy had, and we see throughout 2 Timothy, Paul admonishes him and exhorts him to not get involved with the senseless, ongoing idle babbling and senseless talk. If he had done that, that would have been him getting himself entangled in the warfare of the world. And he would be carried away, if not completely, certainly not being able to apply himself to sound doctrine and sound teaching. He would be caught in the senseless talk and affairs the whole time with other people. So what is the lesson to us there? Applying ourselves to sound doctrine, not getting involved in senseless talk back and forth. But we also see in the context here that Timothy is to lovingly, with humility, engage those that are involved in the senseless talk. Not back and forth type of thing, with humility and kindness, saying, brother, come sit here, let me show you what the Lord really says about this. And then we see the things of God. Romans 2, is it not God's kindness that has won us over? And that's really the appeal of Paul to Timothy here. Because of man's pride, because of his insecurities, his desire to want to esteem himself, if you take a man head on, his pride, his desire to esteem himself only builds up defenses. But if we lovingly engage one another, and because we know sound doctrine and truly have knowledge of these things, we can sit and lovingly reason with someone. And it's that desire for that person to walk in nearness with the Lord, in closeness with him, and not for us to win an argument or a debate that breaks down walls, because we truly are about the things of the kingdom of God. And then we see in the context here that this warfare, which we so often, soldiers' warfare, we so often think of picking up arms and going into battle. While what Paul says to Timothy, and that we see throughout the gospel message of Christ, is fighting for God very often, overwhelmingly means laying down our arms, laying down the things of warfare, because the warfare is the gospel, the means of warfare, the things that really wreak havoc and destruction for the kingdom of God are love, humility, and so on. All the things that man really isn't interested in, because it's not of our flesh. Our flesh is to pick up and want to fight, right? These weapons of warfare. The weapons of warfare in God's kingdom are laying down those things, because those things represent us, our flesh, our kingdom. But the things of God are humility, peace, knowledge that is then displayed in loving kindness to others, and not engaging ourselves in the affairs of this life is doing things in the way God would have us do them, with love, with humility, as well as we are so about doctrine and the things of God that all the things that can distract as well, whatever that might be, alcohol, pornography, television, work, sports, for some of those things, right? Television isn't bad, sports isn't bad, family isn't bad. But when they start becoming an idol, that we are not making a lot of time for ourselves with the Lord, individually, personally, between us and him, because these other things take up all of our time. They start becoming an idol, and they start becoming the affairs of life. So let's do well to be diligent as soldiers, waging war well for God and his kingdom, by laying down arms and fighting with the most powerful tool in God's kingdom, and that is knowledge of his word, sound doctrine, and peace, gentleness, love, appealing to others that we may win them over. Because in the same way that God won us over with his loving kindness is the same way that we will win others over and help them to mature in their walk, their understanding of faith, and it takes kindness and love to do that. And that's being a good soldier in God's kingdom. Blessings, brother. Cheers.